Trefn, a dwi'n galw'r cynulliad cenedlaethol I drefn. Reitem cyntaf ar agenda yw cwestiynau'r prif weinidog, a dwi'n galw ar Russell George I ofyn y cwestiwn cyntaf.
How is the Welsh Government improving access to health services in Montgomeryshire?
We continue to work with the Health Board and other partners in Wales to take a range of actions to improve access to healthcare services that are safe and sustainable and as close to people's homes as possible.
Well, thank you. I welcome that answer in that case, First Minister. You may be aware that stroke patients in Mid Wales are no longer able to access specialist treatment from the Royal Shrewsbury Hospital following a reconfiguration of services, which has resulted in services moving further away to the Princess Royal Hospital in Telford. Can I ask you what discussions your government has had with the UK government and with Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital NHS Trust to press the case for specialist services to be retained in Shropshire? And can I also ask you what your government is doing to ensure that Mid-Wales stroke patients have adequate access to this specialist service?
Well, I'm aware, of course, of the proposals. We expect, of course, as a government that the relevant stakeholders on our side of the border are involved in any potential changes. I know Powys Health Board has been very involved in representing the concerns of residents. I understand there will be further work taking place for final options to be subject to formal consultation later this year.
Simon Thomas.
Thank you, Llywydd. First Minister, I met recently with Newtown Health Forum, who told me that between the hours of 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock at night in Newtown, there is no GP or primary care service at all. The GP surgery closes at 6 o'clock, and it's hard enough to get an appointment there. And the GP shop doc run from the Newtown Hospital starts at midnight. Between 6 and 12, people in Newtown have to travel to Welshpool in order to access GP services. Do you think that's a sufficient service for GP services in Newtown?
I know that the Health Board is looking at the situation, and I know that filling that gap is important to them. For example, if we look at the minor injuries unit at Newtown, the Health Board will be starting a process to develop a long-term health and care strategy for Powys during 2016, and the Health Board will be reviewing MIU services across Powys as part of its work on unscheduled care services in order to make sure that any gap that exists is plugged.
Cwestiwn 2, Neil McAvoy.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on access to Welsh ministers?
Yes, ministers are accessible in a variety of ways.
Your government has made sure Wales has the weakest protection in the UK against commercial lobbying. There is no register. The last presiding officer said that we don't have the same problems as Westminster. But from what I can see, companies like Derin selling access and information to the highest bidder seem to be everywhere in this assembly. I wasn't even allowed to submit a question about cash for access to Welsh ministers. Clearly, you do not believe in open government. So what are you hiding, First Minister?
I need to clarify that all questions that are tabled in order are accepted to be asked in this assembly, and your question has been accepted as it is in order.
Well, I submit the question about cash for access to Welsh ministers. It wasn't allowed to put. So the one is on the record. But my substantive question to the First Minister is, you clearly don't believe in open government, otherwise we'd have a register, we'd have regulations. What are you hiding? What are you hiding?
Nothing. Commercial lobbyists don't have access to Welsh ministers.
David Melding.
First Minister, perhaps I can turn matters a bit more constructively. I think it's very important that politicians, and particularly ministers, listen. And I hope you'll identify ways in which your ministers, either individually or collectively, can listen to the vital interests out there of stakeholders and individuals indeed. Your predecessor used to have open mic sessions for the Cabinet. I think these have fallen into disuse. There may be other methods, but really listening to people's views is key to good governmental decision making.
Well, I entirely agree with that, and being able to engage with organisations is hugely important. It's right to say that open mic sessions haven't taken place for some years. However, I did travel around Wales, offering myself up as part of a masochism strategy, taking questions from members of the public, and like all members, I trust all members, I hold surgeries in my constituency in order to listen to the views of my constituents.
Gareth Bennett.
Diolch, Llywydd. I think that the issues that the Plaid Cymru member raised are perhaps important ones. transparency is paramount. Now, we know that lobbying exists in reality in political circles, but we do have to make sure that it's done legitimately, and we need to know who's lobbying who at times. Are there any plans to establish a register of lobbyists here in Cardiff Bay?
Well, these are matters that were looked at by the Standards Committee in 2013, not a committee that's run by government, and it came to the conclusions that it did. Just to re-emphasise, ministers do not meet with commercial lobbyists. Ministers, of course, do meet with organisations, such as charities and so forth, in order to listen to their views. But it's certainly not the case that commercial lobbying companies are able to bring clients to meet ministers. That is certainly not happening, and nor will it happen.
Ni'n symud nawr at gwestiynau gan arweinwyr y pleidiau, ac dwi'n galw'n gyntaf arweinydd y Ceidwadwyr Cymreig, Andrew R.T. Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, with all the politics that are going on in the country at the moment, with changing leaderships in other legislatures, and the fallout from the Brexit referendum, some of the bread and butter issues do tend to get looked over. And I'd like to draw your attention to the Bliss report that was brought forward last week by the charity, which I think is a vital document that I hope your government will study with care, because it does offer a real route map to developing neonatal services here in Wales. One of the findings in that report showed that only 20% of neonatal units had enough nurses to staff the cots, according to national standards. Now, there have been improvements over time to neonatal units in Wales, but they're considerable. 2008, 2010 and 2011, the report points to. Can you commit in this Assembly session to addressing the staffing problems that this report clearly identifies, that only 20% of units have enough staff to man the cots according to national standards?
Well, the neonatal network works with health boards to provide flexible, responsive staffing to meet the fluctuating needs for specialised neonatal services and to address any shortcomings in staffing levels. To support the development of our workforce, we have announced an £85 million package of investment in the education and training of healthcare professionals in Wales, including neonatal staff. And of course, the findings of the Bliss report will be used by the neonatal network to help all units reflect on and plan for any changes for the future.
I appreciate that detailed answer, and it is a roadmap of sorts, but I think one thing that would be really appreciative is how, in this Assembly, will we measure your success? Going from 20% to 50% of units having enough staff, or indeed 100% of units having enough staff? Because what is key here is identifying the road to success in getting the numbers up in the neonatal units. So can you give us a timeline when the script that you read there is actually acted on, and we will see more staff in the neonatal units providing that vital service?
Well, I expect those numbers to grow over the course of the next 5 years, and I expect every neonatal unit to be properly staffed in that time. It is true to say that recruitment it has been a challenge. It will continue to be a challenge in the light of the vote of a fortnight ago, but we will continue to say to those who want to come to work in Wales that they are welcome, as well as, of course, looking to train new specialists ourselves.
One of the issues that was identified in the report is the retention of staff. I mean, very often we do focus on attracting new staff into the health service, but in particular on neonatal units, it is the ability to retain staff once you've attracted them into the unit. In particular, 40% of mothers will suffer postnatal depression who have had an episode on these units. Ultimately, only 5 of the units can actually offer support for postnatal depression. Now, when you look at those numbers, 40% of expectant mothers will suffer an episode of postnatal depression, and only 5 units can offer that support. That's a clear area that really does need detailed work undertaken on behalf of your government and the health boards. What assurances can you give the Assembly today, and Bliss in particular as a charity who have a special interest in this field, that this area will be given the attention it deserves and we will see progress so that that support can be offered in all units, wherever those units exist in Wales?
Well, I can say that the Welsh Health Specialist Services are working with local services in order to look to provide the services that people would expect. We did announce last year that new perinatal mental health services would be set up across Wales. They are developing well, with 30 new specialist staff being recruited, backed by £1.5 million of new investment.
Arweinydd Grŵp UKIP, Neil Hamilton.
Diolch yn fawr, Llywydd. Has the First Minister seen that Europe's largest conglomerate, Siemens, is meeting today or this weekend in the Cotswolds to work out their post-Brexit strategy, and that Joe Kaiser, the chief executive of Siemens, will be there. And he has said that Siemens is fully committed to the UK, whatever happens. He says we're here for the long term because the UK is a good place to do business. And he also says that he's called for common sense to prevail on tariffs. That's a refrain that we hear every day from the German Industry Federation. Will he join me in welcoming the fact that Project Fear seems now to have changed into Project Optimism?
Well, I saw the report, but in common with a number of businesses that I've met over the course of the past week and beyond, access to the single market is now crucial for them. They are reassured that this position is stabilising within the UK as they see it. But the next big question for them will be, will there be free access to the single market without tariffs?
I wholly agree with the First Minister on that. And free trade is obviously very sensible from both sides, because we have a massive trade deficit with Germany, and it's very much in their interests that there should be free trade within the EU. Trade is mutually beneficial to both sides, whether you have a surplus or a deficit. But in a spirit of constructive cooperation, will the First Minister agree with me that we need in Wales to beef up our relationship with Germany and to put more resource into our connections through the German industry federations and the German Länder and with the federal government to encourage further trade with Germany, and also to take advantage of the political clout which Germany is clearly going to have in the EU in the years to come. And a German commitment to free trade in the EU is the best way that we can get what we both want.
The leader of UKIP seems to be saying that with the UK out of the EU, we need to get Germany to do the work for us in the EU, which is a curious scenario, may I say. The only model that exists that offers free access to the single market is the EEA model. There is no other model. And that has with it, of course, connotations in terms of free movement of people. But there's nothing else on the table at the moment. For me, access to the single market is an absolute red line as far as Wales is concerned. He asked the question about our relationship with Germany. Germany is a major investor in the Welsh economy. We have good relationships with German commercial organisations, and one of the issues that I am examining now is how we beef up our offices overseas, whether we should look to increase staffing in the existing offices or whether we should open new offices. That's a difficult balance to strike. We have had work done by PPIW on that. And we've listened to Ireland, that they have a similar dilemma to us because of their limited resources and their size as well. But we will look to increase the Welsh presence now, as we have done over the past few years, in markets that are important to us.
Good. Well, I welcome that response. But turning to a different matter, after today, the First Minister will be unique in the United Kingdom because we will have a woman Prime Minister in the UK, we'll have a woman First Minister in Scotland and a woman First Minister in Northern Ireland. Does he look forward to the day when he can make way for a woman to replace him in this Assembly?
Well, what I can say to the leader of UKIP is The Guardian, I'm not sure that's a paper he reads often, but The Guardian a few days ago said that it would be the case that women would now be heads of government across the UK. I have to say that was corrected by The Guardian, saving me, hopefully, from radical surgery.
Arweinydd yr wrthblaid, Leanne Wood.
And I very much look forward to the day when Wales is presided over by a woman First Minister. First Minister, tomorrow there will be a new Prime Minister who says she intends to implement the UK's withdrawal from the European Union. Now, Plaid Cymru's view is that the next Prime Minister must implement the pledges that were made to people in Wales by the Leave campaign, even if she comes from the other side of the debate. We want to see an official Welsh negotiating position to be agreed by this Assembly and on her desk as soon as is possible. First Minister, when I asked you last week, you failed to commit to publishing a formal position or to having it debated and formally approved by this Assembly. And whilst I would accept that the new Prime Minister is coming into office much sooner than is expected, Can you confirm that you will aim to come to an agreed official negotiating position and that you will press the new Prime Minister for Wales to have a direct role in negotiations, as was offered by David Cameron?
Yes, I can. I expect that promise to be honoured. We will, of course, have a twin-track approach. We'll have our own negotiating team based in Brussels to see what we can achieve via that route as well. It's complementary to the UK route. There are two issues that are red lines for us. Firstly, access to the single market, free access to the single market. That cannot be compromised on. And secondly, that every penny that is being lost through European funding should be made up by the UK government in accordance with a promise given, not, it's right to say, by the current or the future Prime Minister, but by many in her party.
Thank you, First Minister. You recall last week when we discussed this that I suggested that you needed to have a word with your Westminster MPs and that you needed to tell them to get a grip and get on with their jobs. Last night, the amendments to the Wales Bill were again debated in the House of Commons, and your MPs, the ones at least who turned up, abstained again on Welsh Government policy, this time in relation to the devolution of policing. They did exactly the same last week, abstaining on Welsh Labour Government policy to create a legal jurisdiction. How come your Labour MPs have no problem supporting policing powers for Greater Manchester, but they can't bring themselves to support the devolution of policing to Wales? Why are your MPs letting the Tories off the hook in this way, and how can you defend their behaviour, First Minister?
Well, it's a matter of timing rather than principle, but our position is very, very clear. I mean, it is the situation that we will face in years to come is that there may be very different sets of criminal law in Wales compared to England. It would be possible, for example, for somebody to be arrested in Wales for an offence that's not an offence in Wales, but is an offence in England. It would be possible for somebody to serve a sentence for a crime committed in Wales that isn't a crime in England, potentially. That's nonsensical as far as the jurisdiction is concerned. It is also not sustainable to be in a situation where it would be a matter for the people of Wales to decide what offences they wish to create, but have no say at all in how those offences are policed and enforced. And that remains the position of this government.
That's not an issue of timing, First Minister. There is an issue of principle here. OK, so the Wales Bill is a matter that may not be of overriding priority for your MPs, but the future of the steel industry is critical, and Wales without a steel industry is not a Wales that I am prepared to contemplate. The suspension of Tata Steel's sale process is of significant concern. Now, the proposed joint venture could lead to cost-cutting measures and a reduction in UK steel capacity, and that's according to the analysis by the investment bank Jefferies. If that merger proceeds, we need a cast iron guarantee that there is a future for steelmaking in Port Talbot and the other Welsh sites. How will you secure such a guarantee? And can you explain why there's no statement on this week's agenda on the suspension of the sales process? And will you also confirm that you'll continue to provide support to the employment and management buyout bid, and that you'll press on Tata the importance of retaining the secondment arrangement for senior managers to work on that bid?
Well, two things. The Secretary is meeting with the management buyout team today, and of course he has an urgent question that we were content to accept, of course, in relation to the events of the weekend. I did have a senior official on Friday. I had a senior official on Friday based in Mumbai who was reported back to me. The issue now for Tata is this. We have put a financial package on the table. We expect there to be a quid pro quo, and that does mean that we need to see conditions in terms of guarantees of future jobs and guarantees in terms of a commitment for a specified period of time for several years. We do, however, need to see further progress on the pensions issue, of which we have no control, and indeed the issue of energy prices. So we have a package on the table that we believe Tata will be content with. We need to make sure that we can demonstrate to the people of Wales that that package will achieve what they would expect, but we do need to see progress now, particularly on the pensions issue.
Question 3, Mike Hedges.
Well, the outstanding performance by our national team in Euro 2016 has presented a great opportunity for us to represent Wales abroad. I know that the FAW Trust is already planning to use that success as a catalyst to grow the game further across the country.
Thank you, First Minister. I'm also very pleased how the Welsh team did in European Championships. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who spent Sunday night thinking it could have been us, especially when a former Swansea City player won the tournament for Portugal. In order to continue to develop football, there is a need for improved pitches. And I would like to ask the First Minister how it is intended to increase the number of 3G and 4G pitches in Wales, thus reducing the number of games lost to bad weather throughout the winter.
Well, I know that Sport Wales are working with the governing bodies of various sports, such as the WRU, Hockey Wales and the FAW, to develop an investment programme for 3G pitches. I know as well that they're developing a blueprint for sport and recreation facilities in Wales to support our drive to facilitate regular participation in sport and physical activity, and to make sure that we have facilities that are appropriate and sustainable in the future.
Neil McAvoy.
Diolch, Llywydd. Do you not think that it's a contradiction between seeking to increase the number of 4G pitches, but yet just a mile down the road there's a all-weather pitch which is locked up, children are unable to play there because it's too expensive? Also in this city, in the south of the city, in a very challenged ward such as Splot, the Star Leisure Centre is being closed by your Labour Council here in the city. So there's a hall that children use at the minute to play football. Do you not see the contradiction between what is being said here about increasing facilities, and yet the reality on the ground is that your Labour councils are actually cutting them?
Well, I think the same is true. I am told by my colleague, the member for Llanelli, that Carmarthenshire is in the same position, run by his party, of course. The reality is that councils are in difficult positions financially, but they must ensure that they don't price communities out of facilities in those communities. The member makes a fair point, actually, which is we need to make sure that where facilities are developed, that they do not become so expensive that people can't use them. And where there is a danger of doing that, we would urge all those involved to think again in order to make sure that facilities are accessible.
Angela Burns.
First Minister, I'd like to join with you in saying what wonderful news it was last week. Not only did our Welsh team do as well as they did, but they actually managed to turn someone like me, for whom I can honestly say football was of absolutely zero interest, into a passionate supporter. I could probably even talk about the offside rule if I tried hard enough. But I was very proud of them, and I was also incredibly proud of our fans and the way our fans behaved. And also our footballers came across as real, decent, grounded human beings and a real example to our young people. So I come to the heart of my question, which is, will you have discussions with the Cabinet Secretary for Education to talk about how we can up the hours and minutes that young people in primary schools spend in sport? Is actually being cut consistently year on year. And if we want to identify not just our football stars of the future, but our sporting stars of the future, we need to start early, get them healthy, and get them really used to the whole sports agenda. And instead, at the moment in primary schools, that is becoming a dwindling time and very difficult for rural children, especially those with not access to public transport, to access after school as well.
Well, these are the issues that we'd want to explore with sports governing bodies. The member has refreshing candour when she said she had no interest in football until now. Converts are always welcome, of course. But I think it's difficult to underestimate the publicity that this has given our nation. I was in Paris on the night of the semi-final. I was in Metz the following day. And around me, all I could hear was people saying, Pays de Galles. And that kind of publicity is very difficult for us to replicate. And we have to build on that, and we're working with Visit Wales in order for that to happen. She's absolutely right to say as well that the team have been role models as far as young people are concerned. And they will see that it's possible to be hugely successful in football, and indeed in any other professional sport, without carrying emotional baggage, if I can put it that way, as we've seen in years gone by. We are fortunate in Wales in that we haven't lost many school playing fields, as has been the case elsewhere over many years. And we will look to work now with Sport Wales and the governing bodies in order to deliver as many accessible facilities of the highest standard that we can across Wales.
Question 4, Vicky Howells.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on the Welsh Government's approach to increasing opportunities for adult education in Wales?
Well, we have a range of programmes aimed at increasing employability, improving skills and supporting people of all ages and abilities to enter and progress into employment. And of course, they play a fundamental role in reducing inequalities and tackling poverty.
Adult education can play a vital role in breaking the poverty cycle. That was the message from the Inspire Adult Learners Awards last month, at which I presented the Life Career Change Awards. The new £22 million Coleg y Cymoedd building in Aberdeen will provide an aspirational setting for adult education, but the challenge is also to ensure suitable provision of good quality courses for learners. How is the Welsh Government working with providers to achieve this?
Well, the member is right to say that the new campus will be a superb facility for the people of Aberdeen and the surrounding area. We are in regular contact with the post-16 sector with regards to the planning of provision. That includes the planning of part-time and adult community provision delivered by the FE sector. Delivery plans are also collected and scrutinised by officials to ensure a suitable range of provision is offered within the budget available. And, of course, FE institutions are subject to ESTIN inspections.
Sian Gwenllian.
Mae yna pryder difrifol ymhlith oedolion sy'n dysgu Cymraeg ledled y wlad oherwydd y gyfundref newydd sydd wedi arwain at golli swyddi ymhlith tiwtoriaid lleol. Yn barod, mae yna nifer sylweddol o staff profiadol wedi cael ei diswyddo yn Abertawe a nifer pellach yn wynebu colli swyddi yng Ngogledd Ddwyrain Cymru ac yng Ngheredigion. Mae yna ansicrwydd mawr yn y maes ar ôl i'r Llywodraeth fethu ymrwymo i ariannu'r cwrs Cymraeg i oedolion ar gyfer y flwyddyn nesaf. Ac fel ydych chi'n gwybod, mae cyllideb cyrsia Cymraeg i oedolion eisoes wedi cael ei dorri bron i 2 miliwn. Os ydy toriadau ar y raddfa yma yn mynd i barhau, ond nid ydych chi'n teimlo bod hynny mynd i weithio'n erbyn uchelgais eich Llywodraeth chi i gynyddu nifer y siaradwyr i filiwn?
Wel, mae wedi bod yn anodd dros y flwyddyn ariannol diwethaf, mae hwnna'n iawn, ond hefyd ni wedi sicrhau bod yna lefydd newydd wedi cael ei agor ar draws Cymru o Bontardawe, enghraifft Llanelli i'r brifddinas, mwyn sicrhau bod yna lefydd lle mae bobl yn gallu mynd a defnyddio'r Gymraeg, yn wedi mewn ardaloedd lle mae'r Gymraeg ddim ragor yn iaith yr hewl na iaith gymdeithasol gyffredinol. A wy'n gwybod bod llefydd y lle yn Llanelli, enghraifft wedi bod yn llwyddiannus dros ben mwyn sicrhau bod bobl yn gallu dysgu Cymraeg hefyd defnyddio'r Gymraeg mwyn bod ddim yn colli'r iaith mwyn falle bod nhw wedi dysgu fe.
Darren Miller.
Diolch, Llywydd. Prif Weinidog, mae yna lawer o oedolion dros Cymru eisiau dysgu Cymraeg. As Sian Gwenllian has said, including lots of people in my own constituency, and financial support in order to enable them to learn the language is extremely important. I just wonder what specific financial support you're going to make available over the next few years in order to support and nurture the language, particularly in communities like mine where there is a living language, but it needs fresh life brought into it, particularly for people who move into the area from outside of those traditional Welsh-speaking communities.
That's true. I mean, we have invested heavily, of course, in ensuring that the language is used widely in schools. We know that there are good examples like Gwynedd, like Ceredigion, where there are centres that enable children to be the word in Welsh is trochi. It doesn't quite work in English because it means to get dirty in English. We translate it literally. Immersed. That's a better word. For them to be immersed in the language, and they work very, very well. We find then, of course, that children are able to influence their parents and help their parents to learn Welsh as they themselves learn Welsh so easily.
Hannah Blythen. Cwestiwn 5, felly, Janet Finch-Saunders.
Minister make a statement on the 21st Century Schools programme.
Yes, with pleasure. Our 21st Century Schools programme will see investment of £1.4 billion over the 5-year period to 2019. All 22 authorities will benefit from this investment, which sees the rebuild and refurbishment of over 150 schools and colleges across Wales, and to date 105 projects have been approved within the programme.
Thank you, First Minister. And you'll be aware that for some, when mention of a new school is taken forward, there can be concerns, especially when children and parents are very happy with the school that they're actually attending. Now, under Section 5.4 of the Welsh Government Statutory Schools Organisation Code, local authorities are obliged to consider all objections submitted conscientiously and not to make decisions on amalgamation proposals with a closed mind to stakeholders' concerns. However, in Conway recently, 2 recent amalgamation proposals affecting 5 of our primary schools are being taken forward by the council despite many objections. Many parents, teachers, governors and even the teachers' unions are angry, frustrated and disappointed, considering this statutory consultation to be meaningless, particularly when relevant cabinet decision minutes recently were published before the meeting had even taken place. A fait accompli. In order to address the concerns raised, will you work with the new Cabinet Secretary, obviously in the new school term, for the new Cabinet Secretary for Education, to look again at how the concerns and views of those most affected are considered within the 21st Century Schools decisions, so that these voices are heard and acted on appropriately?
Well, the member criticises Conway Council and the way they have conducted themselves. I know there have been concerns in Conway, particularly with regard to a number of schools, I think some in the Caerhun area, and also, I believe, in Llandudno Junction. In terms of Llandudno Junction, my understanding is that there has been a reconsultation with this, which is open at the moment and will be until the 27th of July. With Caerhun, I understand that has already been approved, but it is correct to say that where we set in place standards that we expect to be observed when school closures and mergers are proposed, that we expect that process to be observed. There are legal pitfalls for local authorities unless they can demonstrate, of course, that they have followed the correct procedure, and we would expect all local authorities in Wales to do that.
John Griffiths.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, as well as building new schools, it's also important that we continue to build new colleges of further education. Coleg Gwent have ambitious and important plans to relocate their Newport campus to the riverfront alongside the University of South Wales campus and indeed further buildings around and about. Would you agree with me that we must continue to improve our further education colleges in that way and support energy and ideas to bring about improvements to further education and particularly perhaps strong links with higher education?
Yes, I do, and I know that there may be proposals coming forward with regard to the Newport campus, but it's entirely right to say that we should make sure that there is no hard and fast boundary between FE and HE for the student. I know that there are very many students who go on to complete degree courses who begin in an FE setting because that's appropriate for them. They don't perhaps have the confidence to go straight into to HE and need to be encouraged to do so, and then of course they become successful over time. So greater working between HE and FE is hugely important in order to create that seamless pathway for the student.
Clear Griffith.
Diolch Llywydd. Yn ôl i'r dyletswyddau sydd nawr wrth gwrs ar y sector gyhoeddus yn dilyn deddf llesiant cenedlaethau'r dyfodol, ond i ddyle fod gorfodaeth ar bob adeilad sy'n cael ei godi gyda arian cyhoeddus ac yn y cyd-destun yma, ysgolion unrhyw ganrif yr 20, fod yn defnyddio pob cyfle posib o safbwynt dyniad newyddadwy.
Mae'n gyfnod iawn ydy. Wedi gweld sawl enghraifft o hwnna lle mae adeiladau wedi cael yn rhagorol ynglyn â Briam. Wedi gweld enghreifftiau lle mae dŵr yn cael ei glasgu o'r to a cael ei ddefnyddio yn yr ysgol i hunan. So felly byddwn ni'n erbyn i awdurdodau lleol i ystyried yr enghreifftiau da wedi gweld ar draws Cymru mwyn sicrhau bod yn gwneud yr un peth.
Cwestiwn 6, Joyce Watson.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the Welsh Government make a statement on GP recruitment in Powys?
Yes, we'll shortly be bringing forward proposals for a national and international campaign to market Wales and NHS Wales as an attractive place to work, and that will include work to recruit, train and retain GPs and primary care professionals and to address the issues faced in Powys and across Wales.
I thank you for that statement, First Minister. But on Friday, I attended a public health meeting in Ystrad Gynllais, and one of the big challenges that they were facing was GP recruitment, particularly in the Coelbren surgery. And I welcome what you have just said in terms of your plans to train and recruit more GPs. And I look forward, First Minister, to receiving an update on how those plans are going to produce more GPs into the areas, particularly in rural Wales, where they are currently finding this to be a huge challenge?
Yes, I mean, we put in an additional investment of over £40 million last year in primary care. £4.5 million of that funding was targeted at workforce diversification, including the creation of 300 posts in a range of primary care roles. The member mentions Colbrand particularly. It's part of the Dillais Valley general practice in Seven Sisters. There have been recruitment problems. The result of that has been the number of GP sessions in Colbrand have been reduced. I know the practice is going through a sustainability support process with ABMU, because even though it's physically within the Powys Teaching Health Board, its area of operation is in ABMU, and the two health boards are working closely to agree a longer-term solution to ensure the ongoing provision of high-quality services.
Russell George.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I'm grateful for Joyce Watson raising this question. It's a particular issue in my constituency, with many GPs reaching retirement age and struggling to recruit. Many surgeries in that instance are having to reconfigure how they operate. And what GPs are saying to me is that there is the potential for the devaluation of their premises if their practices cease to operate as a barrier for recruiting GPs, especially in rural Wales. Can I ask if you're aware of that issue and what steps the Welsh Government is taking to offer more protection and security to GPs to incentivise them, especially to recruit them to rural Wales?
Well, if GPs wish to be seen as contractors and independent businesses, there is a risk involved in terms of potential devaluation of buildings, though I don't see why that should be the case necessarily. It is the case increasingly that many of those who wish to enter general practice don't want to buy into a practice. They wish to be salaried GPs. It's a trend that I'm sure many of us have seen across Wales, and that is something that we, and indeed the profession, will need to accommodate. In terms of Powys as a whole, I can say that there have been 6 new GP partners in Powys and 11 new salaried GPs that have commenced commenced their work during the course of 2015 to 16.
Cwestiwn 7, Llyr Griffith.
Awn eich o Prif Weinidog ddatganiad ar ddyfodol y cynllun datblygu gwledig?
Wel, ni'n gwybod wrth gwrs bod hwn yn cefnogi cymunedau gwledig a'r economi trwy gyfuniad o gyllid gan Lywodraeth Cymru a gan yr Undeb Ewropeaidd. Yn wyneb y diffyg sicrhad gan Lywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig, hyd yma ynglyn â chyllid yn lle cyllid yr Undeb Ewropeaidd a pharhad rhaglenni, allai ddim darogan dyfodol tymor hir y raglen.
Wel, diolch i chi am eich ateb. Ateb diddorol iawn ysgydwyd, oherwydd mi nath eich gweinidog sgiliau chi mewn datganiad, neu mewn ymateb i gwestiwn gen i ar ôl i datganiad wrthos diwetha, i gwneud yn glir bod hi yn parhau a datblygu cynlluniau ar y sail bod yr arian yn dod i Gymru. Os na ddawe o'r Undeb Ewropeaidd, mae hi'n disgwyl i'r arian i ddod yn ôl yr addewidion o Lywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig. Ond y diwrnod wedyn, mi nath ysgrifennydd Cabinet Materion Gwledig gyhoeddi bod rhaglenni megis glasur ar ôl 2019 yn cael ei gohirio oherwydd yr ansicrwydd. Mae hynny'n awgrymu fi bod fawr o strategaeth ganddo chi fel Llywodraeth ynglyn â'r ffordd i chi'n ymateb i'r penderfyniad yn dilyn y referendwm. A allwch chi weithio os ydy'r llaw dde'n gwybod beth mae'r llaw wyth yn neud?
Ni'n mynd i barhau gyda prosiectau cyfalaf enghraifft mwyn symud mlaen ar hynna. Gyda prosiectau sydd yn defnyddio revenue, mae sefyllfa yn fwy cymleth. Ond mae'n hollol amlwg os welwn ni doriad o 600 miliwn o bunnoedd yng nghyllideb y cynulliad dros pob blwyddyn, dros y blynyddoedd nesaf. Felly bydd yna effaith negatif iawn ar rhai o'r prosiectau sydd gyda ni.
Paul Davies.
Prif Weinidog, dwi'n gwerthfawrogi eich bod chi wedi cwrdd â chynrychiolwyr y diwydiant amaethyddol yr wythnos diwethaf i drafod pryderon yn dilyn canlyniad referendwm ar yr Undeb Ewropeaidd. A dwi'n cefnogi eich galwadau ar gyfer cymorth daliadau ffermio a chyllid ar gyfer cymunedau gwledig i gael eu diogelu yn y dyfodol, o gofio y bydd yr Undeb Ewropeaidd yn dal i fod yn bartner masnachu mawr i'n ffermwyr ar gyfer y dyfodol. Allwch chi ddweud wrthyn ni pa drafodaethau mae Llywodraeth chi hyd yn hyn wedi cael gyda Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig a hefyd gyda Comisiynydd yr Undeb Ewropeaidd i sicrhau fod cynlluniau fel y rhaglen datblygu gwledig yn mynd i byrhau?
Wel, does yna ddim sicrwydd o gwbl. Ni'n gwybod bod y Comisiwn, enghraifft, ddim yn wario ran ynglyn â pwyllgorau, enghraifft, sydd yn delio gyda chellido Ewropeaidd ar hyn o bryd. Does na ddim sicrwydd gan Lywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig, so felly does na ddim sicrwydd i bobl Cymru a Llywodraeth Cymru yn bwysig dros ben, bod y sicrwydd yn dod mor gynted a sy'n bosib mwyn o'r sicrwydd i'n ffermwyr ni. Enghraifft, ni'n gwybod bod 260 miliwn o bunnoedd yn y mewn i Gymru ynglyn â taliadau i ffermwyr. Ar hyn o bryd, does na ddim arian ar ôl ni adael yr Undeb Ewropeaidd i dalu am hwnna, so felly mae sicrwydd i ffermwyr yn holl bwysig.
Hugh Ranker Davies.
Diolch Llywydd. On the same theme as the last two questions, I note that within my own constituency and the constituency of the First Minister, we've just had the announcement as part of rural development of grants of up to £100,000 for individual regeneration schemes. And it often surprises people that in a constituency like mine in Ogmore, former mining and heavy industry constituency, that all but 2 of the wards in my constituency are rural. We have 40% of upland hill farming, so we have Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 funding as well. But that Pillar 2 funding has been crucial for rural regeneration, controversial as it is, the allocations. So could I ask him, in his discussions with the UK government, is he stressing to them the importance of making good any shortfall in the immediacy of programmes that are already committed to, but also in the longer term, because we need to make sure that we have that backfill shortfall filled by the UK government in order that we can keep those schemes progressing for many years to come. It's critical to the regeneration of my communities and his.
Yeah, we have made that point. I mean, the issue for us is this, that in future agricultural policy will be wholly autonomous and wholly devolved. We're not going to brook interference from Westminster in that regard. And it's a matter entirely for the people of Wales and people of Scotland and indeed England to decide what sort of agricultural policy should be pursued. The difficulty is, of course, the money. How will the money be distributed? We need to make sure that there is a guarantee from the UK government that Wales will secure at least its current share of funding. My great fear is that there will be an attempt to barnetise funding for agriculture, which means a substantial reduction in funding for Welsh agriculture. The sooner that Welsh farmers get the certainty from the UK government that they need, the better.
Question 8, Nick Ramsey.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the Welsh Government's policies for improving the infrastructure in South East Wales?
Yes, the National Transport Finance Plan, published in July of last year, sets out our investment for transport and infrastructure and services, indeed, for 2015 to 20 across all of Wales.
Thank you, First Minister. A solution to the M4 Brynglas Tunnels congestion is a key priority for the Welsh Government and indeed for this Assembly as a whole. I'm sure that Professor Stuart Cole will be sleeping a little easier knowing that his M4 Blue route is now part of the mix to be considered by the public inquiry announced recently. You'll be aware that the road chef at Mega Services have concerns about the effect of the black route on their businesses, as does the Port of Newport, which may be bisected by at least one of the routes under consideration by the public inquiry. How are the concerns of important local businesses, such as these that I've mentioned, being taken into account and being taken into account by the public inquiry?
Well, I would expect the inquiry, of course, to take full account of the views of all those who express a view to the inquiry. We took a conscious decision to make sure that all the possibilities were examined by the inquiry in order that the public could see all the evidence and so that people would understand that we wanted to make sure that all the options were properly examined. Now, the member knows that I have stood here and said the Blue Route is hugely problematic in terms of its effect on so many people. But let's see what the public local inquiry actually says and see what recommendations are made from there.
Steffan Lewis.
Diolch, Llywydd. The key to ensuring success in the capital region is to pursue a multi-hub approach to infrastructure and economic development. Whilst the City Deal and the City Region model look to build on Cardiff's international brand, we must recognise the role of other population centres as well. Does the First Minister agree with me that in moving forward, the distinct status of Newport as a regional capital in its own right, the capital of the former county of Gwent, should be upheld? And does he agree that this distinct status for Newport should be enshrined in the capital region's planning and should be promoted at every opportunity?
I don't agree with him on that. I think all the local authorities have an equal voice in terms of the development of the city region. Identity is important, I understand that, but the reality is that the economic region pays no heed at all to political boundaries. Newport is obviously an important city. It's our third biggest city. and together with Cardiff and indeed the valley areas to the north, they will all play an important role in developing the whole of the city region for the good of all those who live in it.
Mark Reckless.
I welcome the new allocation of money in the Welsh Government's supplementary budget to the Monmouthshire and Brecon Canal, and would like to ask the First Minister whether this fits into any wider economic development strategy for integrating our waterways into the infrastructure of South East Wales.
With waterways, I think it's more a case of their potential for tourism. The waterways were fragmented many decades ago. The Morgan Canal is it goes underneath the main railway line east of Cardiff, but it isn't connected to the rest of its former network. What's important is that we have a potential for tourism through our canals, and in that way, of course, they can act as economic drivers, and we'll continue to work with the stakeholders involved to make sure that that potential is realised.
Question now, Mohammed Ashkar.
Madam Presiding Officer, will the First Minister make a statement on the council tax collection rates in Wales, please?
Yes, in 2015 to 16, billing authorities collected 97.2% of council tax billed.
Thank you very much for the reply, Minister. Figure released by your government reveal that Blaenau Gwent, Merthyr Tydfil and Torfaen councils have the worst council tax collection rates in Wales. The Citizen Advisory Bureau has labelled council tax as Wales' biggest debt problem, with 6,000 people are now struggling to pay their bills. Will the First Minister explain to those families in Wales, poorest areas, why he decided not to use the funds provided by the UK government to freeze council tax in Wales for the purpose of they were actually intended for?
Well, devolution means it's not for a purpose intended, for a start. It's a matter for the Assembly to decide how it spends its money. Nevertheless, the majority of authorities in England turned down the council tax freeze grant this year, and they chose to increase council tax instead. Despite that fact, council tax in Wales is lower on average than it is in England. And indeed, he will remember, because he was in the chamber, that when council tax benefits were devolved, only 90% of the budget followed. I did not see him advocating strongly at that time that Wales should receive its full share of money in order to deal with council tax benefits.
Ac yn ôl Adam Price.
Mae'n rhaid bod y ffaith bod y ganran fwyaf o bobl sydd ddim yn talu dreth ymhlith rai o'n ardaloedd clota yn adlewyrchu'r ffaith bod y dreth yma yn sylfaenol anheg. Mae'r baich yn pwyso'n drymaf ar y bobl sydd lleiafabl i dalu. Felly, ond yw un bryd nawr i ni bwrwati i ddiwygio'r dreth yma i wneud yn decach fel oedd Plaid Cymru wedi dadledd gwrs yn yr etholiad yn ôl y mis Mai.
Wel, ni wastad yn agored i ystyried ffyrdd newydd o gyllido awdurdodau lleol. Mae rai yn sôn wrth am dreth incwm lleol. Bydd yr rhaid wrth gwrs i gasglu hwnna'n lleol, lle bydd yr rhaid gyd yn mynd i'r lle fydd yn bod yn gweithio neu lle maen nhw'n byw. Mae'n wir i weid, dwi ddim yn wir i bawb wrth gwrs, ond y mwyaf yw pris y tŷ, y mwyaf yw incwm y person sydd yn byw yna. Dwi'n wastad yn wir, wy'n deall hynny. Ond mae'r system sydd gyda ni ar hyn o bryd yn system sydd yn gweithio achos y ffaith bod yn dres sydd yn cael ei roi ar ben tŷ sy'n ffili symud. Ond wrth gwrs, yn y blynydde i ddod, mae'n wastad dadl ynglyn â os yna ffordd mwy effeithiol i sicrhau cyllid awdurdodau lleol.
Diolch, Prif Weinidog, a rwyf wedi derbyn cwestiwn brys o dan reol sefydlog 12.